It's JLark here. We're going to do a hangout on Photoshop, retouching, basically whatever you guys are having trouble with. I'd like to go through and do just a couple of basics for those of you that are very, very new and are just kind of getting your feet wet in Photoshop. Maybe you pretty much stick with Lightroom, or you haven't even purchased it yet, in which case you definitely should. And so I'm going to give it a few minutes and let some people hop in and join. You guys are welcome to join as well. I'm going to let my cohort jump in first since it's their hangout, and then if we have some extra space in the next couple of minutes, then I'll just post the link publicly so that those of you watching from other cohorts can also come hop in. I did get a good group of images from you guys. There's about 10 that got sent to me, so we'll see how many I can go through, and then we'll go from there. Now, a couple of you did send me raw files, which I'm totally okay with. I actually shoot in JPEG for most of my portrait sessions. I understand the benefits of RAW. It's totally okay if you want to do that, but for the way that I shoot, I prefer to be able to shoot quickly, and I don't need all that extra space from the larger files on my cards and then on my hard drive. I don't do enough with the retouching and fixing, I guess, that I see a noticeable difference in quality. So we actually tested it and shot with RAW and JPEG. And edited the images to see if when we sent them to print, if we could see a noticeable difference, and there really wasn't for me. So it's totally personal preference, but we'll look at both. My people, if you would like to come join in now, you can. Let me just drop a link. And you guys can watch me make faces at myself while I'm typing. And join us. And then I'll also post it in the event page. If you'd like to join rather than watch, there's a link on the event page for you to just click on, and that'll drop you guys right in for me. So you can also drop me a message if you want to join, and I'll add you to the list. So all right, let's go screen share. Okay, so if you are shooting RAW and using Photoshop when you open, this is camera raw. So this is what you'll see first. And basically the difference between opening in camera raw as opposed to just opening in Photoshop is that it has all of the information that your camera has captured. So it allows you to adjust things to a greater degree without damaging any of the pixels on the photo. Hi, Lee, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Good. So we're going to look at this one first. So you have all your little sliders over here that allow you to make quick adjustments before you even open it up in Photoshop. So my general rule, if you're shooting RAW, is to make the basic adjustments for anything that should have compensated and been correct in camera, and then Photoshop is mostly for personal touches and style, and that's where you really get into the artistic elements. So for this one particularly, it's a bright sunny day. We have a bunch of really, really cute people that we're playing with, but we're just a little bit hot on them, so I'm going to go in and pull the exposure and just a little bit of the highlights down. And then we're getting this split lighting on all of them too, because the sun's over here. So I'll go in and actually compensate just a little bit for that. And just kind of blend just to soften it. And that's pretty much it. The adjustments are usually, as long as you get close to what you're looking for in camera, then that's pretty much all you want to do is just touch up. So
This is my favorite. So rule number one is that you're never working on your actual image file. So the first thing that I'm always doing is creating a new layer so that no matter what I'm doing to the image, I have the ability to go back. You can do this with masking too, but I was self-taught and I just started doing it on individual layers rather than masking, and I just haven't made the jump over. So however you want to do it is fine. And feel free to stop me if I'm going too fast or if you have questions. So this one was sent by, is this one Julian? Let me see. Yeah. So, oh, well, he's not in, so I can't ask him exactly what he's having trouble with specifically. Struggled to tone down the red on the right side of the faces particularly, while also trying to manage the strong green fringing on the tree trunks. I'd like to see what tricks you can show me. Okay, so let's do that first. Come on. There we go. Every now and then my Wacom tablet gets temperamental. Okay, so if we're pulling out the reds, I don't actually think that the reds are that bad necessarily, but let's say for the sake of conversation, for me, one of the problems is that they're kind of competing with all of this information going on around them. So even though they're in slight sharper focus, I'd actually like to see all of this kind of fall away, but we don't necessarily want to blur all of it, because if we loosely cut them out and kept them sharp, and we blurred through the background more, they'll start to look like they're composited in on the shot. So we can't take it all the way out. But what we can do is we can actually start to tone down the colors. So, and this is something that I do a lot when I'm doing my images. If I want the person in the image to pop, but I want to keep all the information that's around them because that's the story, then a lot of times what I'll do is go in and just play with the hue and saturation, because the color pulling away from it will also pop them out from the image and make it more three-dimensional, and it pays attention. So we don't want to go all the way down to black and white because then we're spot coloring, but a lot of time I'll just pull out certain colors. And then same thing, you can play with the hue as well. So if we think that the greens are a little bit too punchy and we want to pull that down, just shifting the color wheels a little bit and taking it off just a little will actually tone that green down. So you can see it's really subtle overall in the image, but it actually pulls out a lot more too. Now we did a really loose cutout, so we're still seeing a bunch of this, so I would actually take my time if I was actually working on the image. I just updated to like the new one, and now all the symbols are different. But you would want to go in and just make sure that you're going all the way in. Like I can see the really bright greens behind the hat here. So I'm going to do it loosely just because I want to get through a bunch of these images. But you get the idea. So we're keeping all of the color with them, but we're pulling some of the greens out from the background. And it's subtle, but it's just enough. If you wanted to do more with that, you can also go and play with your color balance a lot. So most of the greens are in the mid-tone range, so you can see if we start to pull away, we're starting to pull more fall colors. And you just want to pull away from the greens. And then it's just kind of personal preference, like how far we want to go before it starts looking like neon pink. But a lot of times, like, I'm going in and playing with these as well. So let's go back to the original. And the other thing that you can do is you can actually come over here and go into your channels. And now this is just the green tones that are everywhere in your image. So if the greens are looking really bright to you, right now what we're doing is we're pulling down, and there's a lot of green everywhere in the image. But for the sake of, we'll overdo it so that you guys can see. Now you can see that we pulled all of the green completely out of that image. So we don't want to go that far, obviously, because that just looks silly. But if we went back to layers, we could go in and pull this down out of that image. So we don't want to go that far, obviously. Who did I get in? I can hear myself. Go in and pull this down. I think it's Robin's. Okay, so Robin, you're actually in the call, but you're also listening to it on the event page. So you just have to close that window so that it doesn't echo. So that's the basics of it. Obviously, we way overdid it. We don't want a hot pink in the background, but I want you guys to see what it is that I'm doing so that you get the general idea. So then it's just a matter of playtime with it and deciding where your colors are specifically. Does that make sense? Does anybody questions, comments, concerns? Did I do that too fast? Or just like, no. Okay. So let's go back and we'll go to the basic one. Okay, so new layer every time. And then we'll go in and we'll cut it a little more. This is where it gets really fun, because if I really wanted to cut them out, then I would have to take the time to actually go through, and where you really have painstaking time is coming in and cutting around things like this or strands of hair that you're going. So a lot of times if I'm doing it, I'll come in and I'll cut close to the lines or erase close. But when we get to things like this, I'll come in and cut here. Let's let's invert the selection. Okay, so now we're doing everything else. Okay, so if we went in and we'll make it, just make it black and white for right now so that you can see the color difference. So now I have all of this color that's in between the little grasses and the blades here, and we're at 118%. You always want to be editing at least 100%, especially when you're cutting things out and doing close-up work. But I would go in with a brush, and I would put it on 100% hardness to start, and I would cut, oh, well, hang on. Let me do it the opposite way. Try this way. Okay, so I would go in and I would cut, be on the right layer, and then I would cut in the basics. And then if I was looking to get in here, then I would go down and turn my hardness down. And a lot of it's just time. You know, the difference, especially with composite work when you're working with it, is actually taking the time to go all the way through. Because the bad thing is that even when you're getting in nice and close along this, and if we zoom in to where we're pixelated, there's no way for you to get all of this green out. And the green is from the grass and from the light reflecting onto the, from the grass onto the grains of wheat. So even if you do this, if you wanted to keep the weed in, you'll still have all of that green even when all you've done is cut around. So when we zoom out, you can see that we're still picking up the greens even though we're like paper thin on the stalks of grass. So sometimes going in and taking the opacity down just part way will allow those things to stay in and keep the color, but then we can go over and we can just tone the color down just where we're seeing the green. I'm not an advocate for spot coloring, but it's a good way to show if we were adding things in. Because if we wanted to take this, if they were actually standing on the beach or in a rocky mountain kind of terrain where there isn't any green, where we're looking at a lot of gray, it would be a dead giveaway that we composited them into a different background because of the color reflection. So by going in and working on a lower opacity, just over the areas where the green is showing up, we can tone down the color while keeping the color in general. So even though we're losing like a little bit of it, you can go and pull that back then by going in. And let's go to the original and say that the background was like super, let's make it red. Instead of green. They're in the middle of a nuclear waste spill. But if these are our background colors and they're coming from what we thought was green, the green would be a giveaway. But you can see where we erased and softened the top by going down. Now we have the complementing colors from the background. Oop. Okay. Into it. So it would match. So obviously we would never be working with those colors, but you get the general gist of it, of making sure that they match in. So if we want to go through and we want to pull out the greens and turn them down, let's pull down here. And then, so I just took a black and white layer, and then we'll pull out some of the reds too. And then I can go back in and add color to even out the skin tones. Okay, so it's subtle. But by actually adding in the yellows and stuff, we actually tone down these like bright sprigs of green that were here. Is everybody following? Some of you look like you're like in the middle of calculus class, which is not a good sign. You guys don't have to stay on mute either. We can go through bit by bit. Okay, so let's look at this one more. So little kids are not famous for standing still. And we're in a shallow depth of field, it looks like, because he's definitely, well, yeah, him and her are definitely a little less in focus, especially around the eyes, than the two in the middle. And it's because they're further back. So I'm guessing that we shot at a shallow depth of field for this one. So we can, focus is one of the really hard things to fake, but if you're looking to fake it, one of the best ways of doing it is actually by blurring everything else. So if we take them right now and we were to sharpen them, they're okay. But you can see he's pretty blurry. So if we go in and we sharpen, the problem is that we're actually sharpening all the pixels. So they start to look really grainy by comparison. And the more you do it, the more distorted it gets. So when I'm sharpening, I never want to go past like 1, and that's only if I'm looking for more of like the poster kind of quality. So I'll take it down to like maybe here and pull the threshold up to the 10. Okay, so that helps. But then because I'm trying to get these guys on the same field as these guys, then what I want to do is actually go in with the eraser and take it out of everywhere else. Faster way to do this would be to just select them in a separate layer. But we'll go and we'll actually take it off of them. Okay. So this is all I'm working with, is just them. And then in the opposite fashion, we'll go in and we'll actually blur out everything around them. And the more blur you add to everything else, the more in focus they're going to seem by comparison. And again, this is why if you're working back here and getting the general gist of it, that's fine. But you have to be at 100% because back here it looks like we're getting the majority of what's important. Cute little rain boots and the scarf. And we're following him really close, but one of two things is happening. Either one, we're not getting right up to the edges, so you can see here on her hair, we missed all of this because we can't see it when we're zoomed out. Or two, let's see. You can see it here, we're taking in too much of the outside. So now we have all this texture that in print is not going to match up, and we're going to actually have really strong lines between the blur and not, and that's what gives it away. So you just want to take your time. And again, if we're going around things like hair or the hay, whatever they're holding, the grasses, like you have these ones, you can't come out and do this because you're picking up all of the background. So a lot of times what I'm looking for is a 0% hardness and a very, very small brush so that it's softening around the edges so that I can pull it forward. And it's time consuming, and there really aren't too many shortcuts with it. There's certain brushes that are edge brushes that can read what's going on, but a lot of times they're, you know, they're finicky at best. So going around and cutting things like the edge of the jeans is one thing, but even that, a lot of times I have to be careful and actually move up the hardness of the brush because it's so soft then that it starts to blend in. You can see it like right around the edges here where it's starting to pull in the sharpness from those things. So putting the hardness at somewhere around 60% gives it just enough to not make it a really sharp edge, but enough that it's not overlaying where you're at and creating these little halos, which is always a telltale sign for me. So I hope that's helpful. Feel free to chime in here, otherwise I just feel like I'm talking to myself. Okay, somebody asked me if I could talk about lighting and posing when you don't have a lot to work with. So this is a senior session. It only took me 2 senior sessions to realize that I hate doing senior sessions. And this was in my first studio, which is also known as my bedroom, cleared out. So I didn't have a lot that I was working with. I didn't have the backgrounds or anything, but I want you to see the general setup. So it's essentially an empty room. He's a baseball player. They definitely wanted some photos of him in uniform, and I was working off of a single softbox here and another one over on this side, but they were both positioned at about 45 degrees behind him. So it's just enough to give that light. And these are unedited. These are right out of camera. And so with that, when we were shooting him, I was shooting up into the corners. So the walls and the ceilings are all white. So you can see a little bit of the lines from where the ceiling meets the walls here and here. And I caught a little bit of the window edge here. But for the most part, it's providing me a pretty clean backdrop with just enough shadows to make it interesting so that it's not stark white. Now, if that was the look that they were going for, I could very easily cut him out of this because there's no background. So the image we were just looking at a minute ago with the kids in the grass takes forever to cut out with that because there's so many edges and colors, and there's no way for any of the tools that are helpful to do their job. Whereas with this one, I could very easily go in and click the magnetic tool, start a line, and it would very easily follow for the most part. Now, they're not perfect, and it depends on the settings. So you can see it wants to like jump down here. So I take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes I find that it's faster, but for the most part, you can see that it does a pretty good job of following along the edges, and it can't do that in a scene like the one we had outside where there's all that information in the background. But right now it's really easy for me to go in, take the patch tool or the healing tool, and just go in and follow down these lines. I don't want to go too close to them because as soon as I do, it's going to start to pull in the blue. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it doesn't. But I can go in and just kind of blend this out to give me a nice seamless backdrop, and I can do the same thing here. I'll get rid of the window. And then I'm still seeing just a little bit because of the light, so I can go in with my clone brush. And then the trick is when you're operating with different colors, because this is a lot lighter than the wall because of the way the color is going, you just want to pull your opacity down. Because if you keep it all the way up and you're sampling, no matter how close you are, you'll start to get lines from what you're doing. But if you take it down to about half, somewhere close to that, and then you're pulling, and big areas of sampling. And then you just want to kind of pick from different sources and be careful to not ghost. But you can see how even lighter, like we got the thing there. So you have to be source clicking from very close to where you're at in order for it to blend properly. But it's really minimal in terms of like the general overall. So for me, I shot with this in mind, knowing that I was going to be looking to keep some of that, because I like the texture. You can actually see like the outline of a mural that I was working on too. But I like that it's darker down towards the bottom. I think it makes it more three-dimensional as he's popping off. Now I would probably go in and soften here. And just blend it in a little. It's still too. Let's take it down to like 20. Okay, switch tools and we'll go to the paintbrush instead. So, 10, 15. And so if I wanted to lighten it up, I could. And because I'm working on a different layer, if I go over top of him with the white and blend that out and then decide I don't like it, then I can just go back in with the eraser. You can do this with masking too. But then I can go in and pull the color back out from that. So now I have the idea of a smooth backdrop, which is really a bedroom and walls and 2 lights. And those were my first lights. So they were cheap eBay. I think it was $200 for the whole set. Like, they were not expensive lighting equipment at all. And honestly, you could get the same kind of effect from like 300-watt bulbs that you can pick up for like $10 at Home Depot. Questions, comments, concerns? Let's look at some of the others. Okay. He sent me 2. They're both beautiful. He wanted to know about skin retouching. Let me see exactly what he said. Feel free to chime in here, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So yeah, it's my image. This was actually the one that I had more questions about.
Okay.
And so this was an image of a headshot that I did, and it's one where I did one version. I actually have a different pose where I retouched it just a little bit, and I could never tell how happy or not happy she was of it. So this is the pre-retouching version. I'm kind of trying to come to grips with how much retouching goes beyond reality.
Okay.
Because I definitely don't want to. I don't want to change reality, but I also want to make her look like the best day possible.
Right. So there's a couple of general rules. I was actually just talking about this in my last critique too. Women are never unhappy about looking younger, but they don't want to be unrecognizable. Like, I knew right away when I was over retouching, when I was playing with different styles, when people would look at a photo of one of my clients and say, "Oh my God, it doesn't even look like you." Nope, fail. You know, what you want is, "Oh my God, you look gorgeous," but you don't want them to feel like it's not them. So for retouching, now my go-to is definitely frequency separation, because it allows me to retouch the color and or the texture without affecting the other ones. So let's play with that for a minute. And this is really simple if you've never done it before. So with frequency separation, basically what you want to do is you want to make 2 additional copies of the original file, and then you're going to go and blur the bottom copy very, very lightly, just enough that we're losing the details and it's not sharp. So like 1.5 is plenty. That might even be a little strong. Right there. So it looks like you just missed the focus a little bit.
Okay.
It's not drastic at all. Then with your top layer, you're going to go up to Image, Apply Image, and you're going to go down to Subtract. And then for your layer, you're going to go to Layer 1. You can name it like whatever. I don't name my layers now because I know what I'm working on. But you can see all of the details. Is that coming through on the Hangout?
Yeah, a little bit. I got it.
Yeah, so it almost looks like a sketch, a little bit, like a grayscale sketch. And then you're going to go over here to your to your type, and take it from normal to linear light. Now, with both of these lit, it's actually the same exact image that we started work with. So you see no difference. So with the bottom layer, when we highlight it, we can see the blur. The top layer takes it right back to where it was when we started. So essentially, it looks like we did nothing. What we did, however, was we separated the texture from the color of the skin. So now we can go in and play. So let's say, for the sake of conversation, that she had, let's go back to the original. Let's say, for the sake of conversation, that she had really dark circles under her eyes. Like, you know, she was out drinking right before the shoot.
Got it.
And so this is something that you start to deal with age. Obviously, it doesn't look like that. But you'll start to see the difference in skin, because the skin under the eyes is so thin, we start to see color variations in there first. This enables me to take them out without messing with the texture. So my general theory, if I wanted to move the texture, we'll say things like any kind of imperfections in the skin, any age spots, you can go in and take the color out, but we're not touching the texture whatsoever. So let's go in up here and let's look at the color difference between the white of the highlight of the cheeks, and then it comes into this yellow, and then it gets into the really dark red here, right? So let's say that I wanted to keep all of the texture here with the lines and the wrinkles, but I wanted to change the color. Now let's go in, and I'm going to take it way up just so you can see what it is that I'm doing. And we'll say we wanted this color under the eyes. See how you can still see all of the wrinkles and the lines?
Yeah.
So we kept all of the texture of the face. So this is a really good way to not get that plastic, muddy skin when you're going through. Now this is a little bit much when we start to scale out, you can see, but I want you to be able to see it on the retake. So a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm picking similar colors and just lightening it up a little bit. So let's go in. And you can do this with color, like you can do it with the paintbrush. My art background, my painting background definitely comes into play in how I retouch, but I can go in and see. Maybe I just want to lighten it up a little just to make the eyes pop. And then again over here, I want to get rid of some of this red here and lighten them up. But I didn't get rid of any of the texture on her face. So I'll go in with the color then, and I'll touch up anything that is a color spot on her skin. And I'm not changing anything about any of the texture. We can still see all these lines. Now, if you're retouching the color, then by default, it's going to change the look of it. So like, there's a lot of color right here on the eyelids because of the way they go in. They almost have like violet. So it'll totally change the look of it, even though the lines aren't there. This is a really good way for me to go in and clean up too. I work with a really good makeup artist, but if I didn't and the eyeliner's not even, or she has any kind of fall off, or the lips aren't even, I can go in and touch up the skin. Same thing, if I wanted to go in and say, take this color and wanted to fix her lips, I could essentially go in and change all of it. And I still have all of the texture of the lips there. So that's really helpful when the makeup isn't even and I want to go in and say just touch, let's say that this little piece right here is over and the highlight is actually where her lip ends. I can go and select what's nearby and come in and shape her lips. And you just have to be careful about where it is that you're drawing from.
Is that something that you might do also on a separate layer?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And the nice thing that I do tend to do is, it says my microphone is muted. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you were muted for
Okay.
like 2 seconds.
Okay. One of the things that I tend to do, because I don't actually have perfect eyesight, I've found that for me, staring at a screen all day, I'll totally overdo it and then change the opacity on it. So it's entirely probable that if I decided, if she was like, oh my God, all I really, really want is rosy cheeks in all my photos, and I went in and added color, it's entirely probable that I'm doing this on a separate layer to add it in, which looks ridiculous, but I can totally take that and pull it back to where I want it to be and then go in. So it's easier for me to follow along when I have stronger colors to work with, so that I know that I'm doing it well. I'm the same way with dodging and burning. If I'm going in and changing something, I'm usually at a higher exposure and changing it way more than it'll actually look like in the image, because I know that I can go in and pull it back to where I go, oh, okay, that's good. So it's this interesting thing, like the human eye actually can't tell something's in focus until it goes past focus. So if you ever take your lens and try to manually focus it, it's right around the time that you go past the focus that you go, oh, that was it, wait, go back. So it's the same thing for me. I like to retouch and do it over the top and then pull back from it where I can play with it. Okay, so now we got the gist of it. We can go in with the color and we can change any of these little spots here. And you can do it pretty quick too, and just kind of sample. And I go back and forth between the healing and the cloning and the paintbrush when I'm fixing color and evening out. Another way that you can do it, if you were trying to do a fast retouch and we weren't as concerned with the overall quality, it's not necessarily a beauty shot. When I have shots that are further away, you can actually select color that are similar to each other. So like this whole thing is like pretty much the same kind of orangey color scheme, and then you can go in and blur the color, and what that actually does is it evens out the tones. So you can see, like right now it's picking up the hair colors. From that, so if we go, we're just a little bit too close to the hair. Same thing, I'm just hitting F8. So here it's not working as well because of the roots of the hair, but this is why you can't do it with close-up shots. But like right here, we've got like this nice highlight on the chin. And what that does is it completely evens out the skin tones. Now for me, this is going to start to look a little plastic really fast because the blur is turned up so high. But you get the general idea of it. We're going and we're just basically selecting shapes of color. So you're just looking for where the shapes are. Now you would take the blur way down from where I have it. I have it way, way high. But what I want you to see is that even though we're evening out and flattening all of the colors so that from far away it looks totally plastic, when you get in and you're up close to it doing beauty, see how we still see all of that texture in there?
Right.
So let's go out and do it for real now so you can get the gist. We'll do it again. We'll still select. Okay. But if I do it this way, and I only do it this way if I'm on a time crunch and it doesn't really matter, usually what I'm teaching, you want to go in and select shapes of color. So you wouldn't take it down here because we have a lot of color information in here, and it'll take, basically when you're blurring, it's taking all of the information and finding a medium. So if we take that, we'll soften the blur so it's not quite so offensive. See, it's picking from the dark reds here and the whites here and finding the medium between them, which is what makes it look plastic. The further you bring it down, the more it allows for the information to stay. So this is a really good way to cover a lot of area quickly So depending on where my price points were, like I get on average at least $3,000 a session. I can take my time to edit the images, and I'm only shooting a couple of sessions a month. If I was going to shoot high volume, this is totally an editing thing that I would employ because it takes a lot less time to cover all of the areas.
Floors or walls are made of like clay and dung. You know, I mean, it's primitive.
Say that?
It's scary.
A lot like my first studio out here in LA. I mean, and
Are
you
you
know,
guys hearing that?
when I see this family, when we meet them, you feel horrible for them because they're pretty much, if you had the Mayflower
Maybe
hit,
that's on mine.
Oh, that's awesome.
Did you guys hear that, or was that
Yeah,
me?
it was like we were.
I think we crossed wires with
We
another
crossed
hangout.
wires.
That's pretty funny.
Someone from the 50s started patching in phone signals.
I like it. So that's the general gist of it. Do you get the general idea?
Yeah, that's great.
That's
Great.
Okay, so as far as skin retouching in general, and you can kind of see now that we went and did the cheek, how we kept a lot of the texture of the skin, but we evened out a lot of the skin color as opposed to the other cheek. So that's something to work with. One of the things that I'm always looking for, and then it's this, so it's the same thing. If we move over to texture, I think we might be picking it up. Maybe we're picking it up from Lee.
Yeah, I think it might be from Lee.
Lee, you're fired. Negative points. Okay. So same thing then. If we wanted to leave the color and we were happy with the color, then we can go in and we can do the same exact thing, but we can just touch the texture and it doesn't affect the color. Now, one of the best ways to see that would actually be on, let's go up to that 100%. Let's look at the hair and say we just wanted to touch the texture but not the color. I could go in, smooth out all this texture, but see how the color stays exactly where it is?
Right.
Okay? So that's taking the texture down. I could even out the color. Well, I borrowed from the bottom of her face, which is why you don't want to. Let's go up to pink instead. So I could even out the color, but keep all the texture, or you can work off of the original, and when you're doing that and blending, then you're messing with the color and the texture, so it's blending both. Now, as far as what to retouch, my general rules are study people's faces for emotions. So even with what we were doing already, I already got rid of a lot of her expression, especially around the eyes, by changing the color or the texture. So let's go back. And we'll just look at what lines can go. Okay, so the first lines that we develop are the laugh lines, which are good. They're happiness scars, but women hate them anyway. I'm not sure if men don't like them as much as we don't like them. Maybe they do. But women hate them. So the general rule is if you can see it on a kid's face, you leave it. So when people are smiling and having a good time or they're expressive, like my nephew is one, and he mean mugs like it is his job, like bad cop style. Every time you tell him no to anything, just, you know, and so we see this little crinkle in the eyebrows here and the lips, like, and he's one. He has brand new skin that's like fully elastic. So you wouldn't want to get rid of these lines. Same thing when he's smiling. When we smile, almost all of us, because we're raising our cheekbones, muscle structure is really important to understanding how to retouch properly, is how the muscles affect each other. So our eyes go away because our cheeks are pushing up, and that's what's causing it. So when we smile, that's what creates these lines right here. And the thing with kids and younger women and people is that we smile and the lines appear because of the creases in the skin, and then as soon as we relax our cheekbones on our face, they go away. And then as we're doing that over and over again, it's like folding a piece of paper, so the creases get more inset, and that's what creates the wrinkles that stay. So if they are expression lines, you have to leave them. Now, if this was a picture of her where she was actually sitting stoic and was just kind of looking, and it was a clean, sorry. If it was a clean photo where we were looking at her and it was more of a somber thing where she wouldn't have laugh lines, then you could retouch them. So first look for the expression lines, and when in doubt, go make faces at yourself in a mirror, which I've done before to see. So
Every morning.
yeah, every morning. So these are expression lines right here. The eyebrows are part of, or the eyelids are part of her facial structure. So if we retouch them out, it'll start to not look like her. What we can do is we can change the color in here to soften them, but we have to leave them. Now, once we start to get below the original eye, so this is part of the original eye with the eyelid, and this is the underneath right here, these are age lines. So all of these can go. Those can go, and they don't mess with the facial structure at all. Now, I'm retouching fast, so you're seeing a lot of smoothing from other things, but like from here down can go. And some of these up here are also age lines, so these can go as well, or at least get softened. Same thing, the double lid, like we have the main line coming down here, and then the second one, that's an age thing from elasticity and the fact that the eyelids start to droop. So we could also retouch this one out here, but we would have to leave the other one. And you just kind of have to play with it and really just keep going back and forth and going, does it still look like her? You know, I don't feel like we actually changed anything about her face enough that anybody's going, that's not you. You know?
Got it.
Lines that can always go are the neck. These ones, gone. These are big no-nos. This is all sagging skin and the fact that her skin isn't holding up to gravity as well anymore. She'll start to get double chins. These go. X. They go. All the time. Same thing with forehead lines. You can definitely soften deep inset lines in the forehead, so these ones can go. And usually right around the forehead, again from frowning, you can tell how mad she is at the people in her life by how deep inset these two are. Those can usually go and get softened. Across the bridge of the nose can go. And then we start to see signs of aging when instead of pores, we see lines. So right here, we're seeing strips of skin going down. Those can go. But this is where it really helps to do the frequency separation, because this is texture that would go. These lines, I would totally get rid of these on the texture layer of the frequency separation and keep the color. And when you start doing it on the main layer like this, and obviously I'm being dramatic and not taking my time with it, but that's where we start to get like the smudging of the skin. Same thing down here. This is absolutely an expression line. It'll show up no matter how old they are. So I would keep this one. And some people have like the double dimples, so they'll have another one that's pretty deep inset, like right about here. But all of this out here, this is all age. So those can all go without affecting anything as far as her face. And then it's really just like personal preference, like going in and evening out. You know, all of those would go for me. These would go. And so that's the general gist. I always pay attention right here at the bridge of the nose too, because this wrinkle that we took out will also come and distort right around here. So this is one that color would come in for me, and I would even up the color right here, this red, with what's above it, just to soften it a little bit. But we're still not changing. Nobody's looking at that and going, oh, you were obviously proud of, well, maybe they are because the quality's bad because I'm going fast, but that's not changing enough about her that anybody's going, that's not you. That doesn't look like you. Oh my God, you had such good Photoshop done. Those are all bad. If somebody's commenting your photo skills, if somebody's like, wow, you're really good at Photoshop, you're not. If you are, they don't know you're doing it. So, so that's the gist. Like, those are the main wrinkles that I would take out that would leave her face, and then it's just kind of touch up. Like, a lot of these stray hairs would go, and I would even out some of the color around her nose so that it doesn't look too red, and maybe pull a little bit of this pink back onto her cheeks because we washed it out with the highlights, which the lighting's really pretty, but we want to keep the color. And the white will actually counterbalance and take a lot of the red out of her cheeks, which is like the one place that you want it, because rosy cheeks are equated with youth as well. So you can fake a lot of youth with color. Is that helpful? Does that about?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm gonna save that. Okay, so tell me a little bit about this one and what you were looking for.
Well, I think that for this one, the balance was how much skin do you start to touch? Because I don't want her face to look wildly different than the rest of the skin on her on the front of her chest and her shoulders and things like that. So I wanted it to be consistent, but I also didn't want to. This was one where balance here. And,
yep, absolutely, and you're exactly right. It's like those girls that do makeup and stop at their chin, and it's a totally different color than the rest of their body. I think that you did fine here. This is the perfect example of what we were talking about before, where I would go in with frequency separation and take my time with the healing and go in and touch up individual spots and really work on the face. But when it came to the neck and body, that's when I would probably switch to shape selecting and blurring, because you don't have to be as careful with it. One, we're not seeing as much of the texture, so we're not really, even zoomed in, we're not seeing too much of the actual texture of the pores in the skin. And the skin on the face is totally different than the skin on the body in its texture to begin with. The body has smoother texture, mostly because the face is always exposed, like, to the elements as well, sun and rain and weather and whatever else is going on. And our bodies, may be exposed during, say, the summer when we're wearing a bikini, but for the most part, it's covered, at least to some extent. So you could very easily go in and select color groups like this, and then just Command F filters it and smooths it out. Now, because I'm not working on frequency separation, I'm smoothing out the color and the texture. So it depends on that look you want. But you could definitely go in and select just like that, and then just kind of Command F, and it would keep the individual things, because there isn't enough information that you have to go in. You can, but it'll take you a lot longer to go in. And, like, if we wanted to get rid of, like, every single freckle, sitting and doing this is going to take you forever if you're doing full body shots, especially for people like me that do boudoir, where there's a lot of skin exposed. The only place that I would probably pay attention and give a little more TLC is the neck, and it's specifically for those necklines that we were looking at in the other photo. But, like, once we get below the collarbone, then pretty much all we're looking for is the shapes of light. So we're looking for the shape right here, and you always get this, like, sort of triangle of shadow because of the cleavage, and then we lose it all the way down. So if this was a full body, I get less and less meticulous with it the further down I go, because really from here up is pretty much all anybody's looking at in the photo anyway, especially the kind I take. So, but no, I think you did perfectly fine with this one. I think it's a good transition. It doesn't look like you spent more time on one than the other for me.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we can talk about retouching old photos. I have this one and this one. Who wants to go next? Don't all volunteer.
Okay.
Hi, Al.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Good to see ya.
Yeah, likewise. So
This one, I guess, wanted to know if you have a good technique for the hairs that fly from the wind in the person's face. If there's only one or something, it's not a big deal. But when you get quite a few, I think it becomes a little bit more work.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to see if you had any cool techniques for that.
Patience. It depends on how it is. Like, all of these would go for me, but no, there's really no good way around it. The healing brush, the spot healing, is actually pretty decent at following as long as you're editing, and a lot of times you can actually go higher than 100%, especially if it's a good photo, and really all you're doing is tracing. But for the most part, and I would probably do this in frequency separation too, because you can see, like, as I'm going over, I'm ruining her texture on her lips. So being able to go back and through with both, because it may be that this is primarily, well, let's see actually. So frequency separation, we go in and make 2 copies, go to blur, and then take it down to like, and then image. File image. Couldn't find it there for a second. And then let me see the texture, switch back.
Sounds like somebody's getting dental work done.
Are you hearing that? That's actually my computer running. I have so many
Oh.
freaking programs open. Sorry.
No worries.
That's awful. Yeah, I don't know why. It's been running really hard the last couple of days. I think it's because I'm working on videos.
Oh, it's quiet now.
Good. Okay. So we can go in and we can take out, I'm working on the color right now. And you might even be able to fake it a little bit and do the same thing with the selection and even out.
What keystroke are you using to fade the color on the selection?
Well, it's actually, I'm using the blur to change the color, and so I'm just hitting Command F, which applies the last filter you used.
Right.
So we can take out a lot of the color. That's not going to work. We're pulling in the color here. So yeah, like, you can pick and play with it, but sometimes you really do just have to work. A lot of times I can go in with the paintbrush and kind of roll over it a little bit, as long as but you can see, like, even though here it like matched up really good, just going down that other ½ an inch, we start to see the color difference in it. So you're constantly selecting from where you're working specifically. But for me, the easiest way to do it is to really just go through, probably on the original, because you want to take out the texture and the color, and it's just time and going through and selecting. So, if it becomes a question of, is it worth it for the shot? Do you have to keep the shot? Is there one that doesn't have the hair in her face because you caught it the next frame that you can use? And which hairs are essential to remove from the whole? Because right now we're zoomed all the way in, and so we're seeing every single little one. But if she's getting an 8x10 print and it's going to be sitting here, then from this point of view that we're looking at it, it's these ones here that are bothering me. And so we could take them back, and this one along the chin, and maybe this one here. But the spot healing is probably the best tool for that. And then I might be inclined to go in and mess with the hat too. But see how it didn't mess with the texture of the hat when we took that out?
Yeah.
I love the spot healing brush for that.
Yeah, me
Now,
too.
look, now that we got close, this is why you don't edit while you're zoomed out. Because I was taking it and putting it elsewhere, it's just adding the hair strokes back in elsewhere on the
Yeah.
face. So it's a trade-off, but you could take in and just play with them a little bit and just see what they look like.
Hmm.
It's like she just got a haircut. This is awful. So yeah, my recommendation is you just stay out here. So my general theory, I'm not a Nazi about hair because I don't do like beauty and editorial work. So I don't mind that she's laughing while the wind is blowing her hair around. I think that it adds to the story. So I'd be inclined to go in and retouch along her face and take a lot of those, particularly if they're sets of hair around where they are more than like a single strand, and if they're going across her eyes or across her lips, then I think they get distracting. But like these ones down here, they don't bother me at all. I might take one or two out that are like really rogue, but I don't mind the wild hair look personally.
Right. Right. Cool.
Other questions?
No, that's what I had on my
Okay.
mind.
Cool. Let's take that one off then. Don't say it. All right, this one. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this one either, but let's just play with it. One, probably the light would be the biggest issue on this one, and I have done this so many times where you're fighting with the shadows caused by the hair because they're in between your subject and the light source. So let's play with that for a little bit. Let's go in and see if we can even this out a little. So one thing that we can do is we can play with the color and we can pull out some of the blues. So if I was to go in and just pull it just a little bit towards yellow and away from the blues, that starts to blend in the colors a little bit. And then we can do the same thing over here. And we're just pulling it away. That way we're at least keeping, we overdid that one a little bit. That way we're at least keeping the same color tone. And these are things that a lot of people miss when they're doing it. Like they'll just dodge and try to lighten up the exposure of the face without paying attention to the color, and then they wonder why it looks a little bit off. That's why it looks off. So we can go here. Now we picked up the reds in the hair, which I didn't necessarily want to do, so I'll go in and take that back out. Okay, so this is where we started. See the difference in all the blues and the shadows? A lot of it's color theory too. So even though we didn't change the exposure at all on the image yet, can you see how it looks like there's more light on her face as a result of that? Because the light from the sun is warm, right? So now we can go in. And same thing, if we're drawing attention to her face and that's what we're looking for, then the next thing that we would want to do, let's do new selection from that. We'll go in and let's just change the light on her face. So a lot of times you're not messing with everything. You're just messing with little sections. So right now, all we're trying to do is lighten up her face a little bit from this. So if we go in and mess with the exposure just on her face, and this is all in Photoshop and not in RAW, even though we sent me the RAW like a good boy. I'm left-handed and it always wants to go on the right hand of the screen. One of the other things is that because we have these really harsh shadows from the hair, turning down the contrast a little bit will help soften them as well. Okay, so now we're looking from there to there. So they're subtle little differences, but they make a lot of difference. Like watch just the eyes and how much more we lighten them. And then if they feel a little out of place or too done, then just go back and back it off a little bit. Okay, and then of course you can dodge and burn. So we'll just do a new layer, overlay, fill with neutral color. Okay, and then you're going to come over here to the dodge. So I want to go in and I want to pop the eyes, which are hiding behind the shadow here. And I'm going to totally overdo it, 1, so you can see, and 2, so I can see. The general, and this is where she looks a little like Twilight poster right now. But we'll go and we'll back it off. Okay, but the general idea is that you want to pay attention to where the light is, but then you also want to retouch for beauty sculpting, which is basically just paying attention to the bone structure on her face. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the eyes, we're looking at the nose, we're looking at the cheekbones and the lips. A really, really good way to learn how to dodge and burn for beauty is to actually go watch a makeup contouring video and see how they contour different things, because that's essentially what they're doing, is photoshopping their face in real life. But we can go in and we can touch up and lighten right along the cheekbones, these little like Rembrandt triangles. We won't do it on this one because her hair's in it. And then we want to follow here, okay? And then you can basically, wherever you're going over, because we're trying to blend the light, you're going to double over where there's shadows. So if I'm doing it once here, I'm probably doing it twice here just to help soften and blend in. And then same thing along the lips and the bridge of the nose, okay? Which we don't have to do here because the highlight on her nose is pretty strong. And then you're going to do the same thing. I always go along the inside of the eyes too, just to really make them pop. And then you'll do the same thing with the shadow. You're going to go underneath the cheekbones to help them pop, and around the sides of the face here. Okay, and then under the lip. This isn't a really good one for that because her hair's in her face, but under the lip and under the nose, and then you can go and kind of soften where there's other highlights. And then along the eyes, you'll follow. If she's doing dark eyeliner, then you're going over it with a dodge. Because she wants her eyes to pop. And then the iris always has a darker color around the outside. And here's the biggest tip that I can give you for femininity with the eyes that everybody overlooks. If you look at the old, well, actually, let's go see. Let me see if I can pull something up for you guys and show you. Google. Oh, you guys are still on my thing. Switch you guys over here. Okay. Hollywood glamour 30s and 40s. So they would do 90% of this in camera, and everybody's always looking for how to create it. Let's see if we can find a good one. This is a good one. Okay. Let's go back. View image. Okay. So right here, everybody will do the eyelashes, and they'll darken right there, and they'll think of that, and they'll even have eyelash brushes to make the lashes longer. But what they don't pay attention to is the shadow. So it's a little blurry, but see this shadow right here that's cast by the long eyelashes onto the actual eyeball itself? Nobody pays attention to that. So when you're doing glamour work or feminine portraiture like that, and you want to accentuate the eyelashes, the best way to do that has nothing to do with working on the eyelashes, but actually darkening underneath right here to create that shadow that's caused by big lashes. And it makes it totally pop. Okay, so that's really drastic. But we'll go through anyway. We've got our exposures turned way, way high. Usually when I'm retouching for dodging and burning, I'm only operating at like maybe 20 to 30. Sometimes I'll do 40 to 50 with the intention of changing the opacity afterwards if I'm having a hard time seeing what I'm doing. So we'll go in and we'll add, and basically you're light sculpting right now. All you're doing is you're adding shadows and light, and basically you're tracing. So you can't, it's really hard to create light where there isn't light. So this is where getting it right in camera really helps, but if we take it and we're essentially just following the trails of light, and you can do it on close too, and you follow the shadows where there's shadows, it'll just help the entire image to punch and to have that kind of 3D effect, because that's what you're doing. Because that's how we perceive depth perception, is light and shadow. So if something is coming forward, it catches light and it protrudes. If something is falling backwards or underneath, then it won't catch the light, it'll be in shadow. So that's how we perceive it. So if you want to have a more 3D kind of feel to your images, this is a really good way to do it. So just look at her shirt. See how much more three-dimensional the folds of the fabric are and how much more it looks open? That's what we're looking for. And so we're color dodging on this, and then if I wanted to make her pop, then you want her to come forward, so the background, would take a darker tone as well. Now again, because I'm doing it loosely and I'm not paying attention, there's a lot of fall off on her shirt right now. So you just want to be careful with what you're doing with that. Now I think it's overdone, but you can definitely see the difference. So see how on her cheeks particularly, it starts to look fake because there isn't light here on the cheek at all. And we tried to force it to be there, and it's not. So we probably want to go in and back that way down now, and it looks much more natural. We still added a lot of depth perception to the shot in general. And what that looks like when you're looking at it without, because it's an overlay, this is what it is. You're essentially painting and drawing. And then you can play with that. So that's a little too abrasive for me. But we can take it down to like, even like 15%. It's just enough to like create a little bit of punch and separate her. And if we take it up to say 30, okay. So that's pretty much that, unless you guys have questions, which since you're all on mute, I'm guessing not. Okay, so Bruce sent me this one. He did an incredible retouch of it for repair, and this is a great one for that too. I have tons of old family photos that are generations old, we'll play with that, and this is a really good way to learn some of the stuff. So if you're brand new to Photoshop and you primarily work off of Lightroom and you have them in here, you'll probably have some familiarity with it just because of the similar layout, and they're both done by Adobe, so they operate similar. But let's go through and play. So your healing brush is always a staple. You can go in and fix a lot of things with that, and a lot of it's just patience. So we can take out a lot of the dents. Frequency separation would actually work really well on this too, because we could take out what's scratches and blemishes in the photograph itself, or we could go in and take out color. When you have big open areas, you can be a little more generous with the areas that you're using, but that's really helpful. The other one that's really helpful for repairing is the clone, which looks like a little stamp. And basically what you're doing with that is you'll go and you'll hit Option, and you'll click on an area to sample from. So if I sample from here and come out here, I'm going to paint. Let's turn the opacity up so you can see. It's going to sample from there, and if I kept going, I would essentially create another version of it, because it's sampling from over here. But in comparison, if I sample from over here, it'll take the clean part of the photo and erase what's away. Now, the difference between the healing brush and the clone brush, because they both essentially do the same thing. Julian finally managed to get the connection working. The healing brush and the clone brush are both designed to help take out things that shouldn't be there. With the clone brush, it copies everything. So again, coming down here, it's copying the color and it's copying the texture. And it'll keep doing that. The healing brush, if you spot healing, then it samples from areas around it. So when I click here, actually let's click on his face. When I click on his face, it's going to sample from everything around the circle that you see and take most of it out. Whereas if I tried to take out the rock and wanted him floating, it would sample from a lot of what's around the image. Now it actually picked up some of the bottom here too, but then we could go in again. Okay, so that's spot healing. Now if I wanted to sample from here, I can also do the option click with the healing brush, which means if I click here, it's sampling the texture from here, but the colors from around it and the texture from around it. So you can see the difference where it's picking up the whites and lighter colors up here from what's around it, but it's copying from down here. With the patch tool, it's good for selecting little things that you want to change and follow. So like we have this little scrape here. We could take that and we could pull straight down to here, and then you would just be careful to line up the edges of it. And so you can sample from anywhere. If I took that and put it here, it would take him and it would sample the colors and the textures around and add in where I pulled from to that area, which is really helpful if you're working with, say, fabrics and you're trying to fix something like, let's say her shirt has a pattern on it and you're editing a part that's in the shadow, you could sample from a part that's in the light and it would add it, but it would take into account the darkness and the shadows from what's nearby. The paintbrush tool is self-explanatory. You can sample around from other areas and borrow colors. Usually if I'm using the paintbrush tool in images, I'm not using it at 100% opacity. I'm just using it to kind of lighten and even out. So if I wanted to get rid of a lot of this texture, and kind of smooth it out, I can go at half and I'll just keep sampling from where I am around it. It's also what I use to sign my name, because all art should be signed and you guys should be signing your name rather than having a watermark. Eraser tool, gradient smudge tool, I don't really use. The dodge and burn, we were just playing with that. That's basically the gist of it. We can play with paint a little bit. Like my grandmother, she always tells me color photography is a privilege. So they didn't have it when she was little. So most photographers that I know would be inclined to go in and dodge and burn to lighten the face, but we're actually damaging, and you can see the greens. Well, maybe you can't, but I can. The greens that we're getting from here because of the way that we're lightening the tones. So if we wanted to go in and pull that out, and we find that dodge and burning isn't working, a lot of times I'll go in and just select the area that I'm working on that I want to lighten up. So with older photography, you can take that, you can go into the image and go to adjust and just change the exposure just on his face. Okay, and then the highlights are really high on here, but we wanted to pull it out a little bit, so you can go in and back that off. You can do this with masking tool too, but I would go in and even out here. And then you have enough of his face that you could go in with dodge and burn then on a separate layer, so that you're not not damaging the original and not pulling the tones. So what we do when we have the gray is we're editing on a neutral platform. So if we're doing white, it's only pulling from gray tones. And if we're doing dark, it's still pulling from gray tones. So you can see that as opposed to the color. Okay, so we could go in with dodge, and again, you would just follow the light of the shot and the bone structure, cheekbones, nose, lips, chin. Those would be the areas that would have light on them. There. And then same thing with the body. You would just follow the light where there would be light. But the base is what we're really interested in, because that lost a lot of itself in the shadow. So you can start to see how we pull out the actual face from it. Let's segregate them a bit. And then if it's too bright, then you can just pull the opacity down, but you can see how much more we added in. So then it's just kind of personal preference to go back and find what works. So it's subtle differences like that. And then you could go in and play with the color because it's very green. So just taking it to black and white. Everybody calls it large sepia because I don't like black and white all the way. But I'll take it down to like here. And then if we wanted to go in and add color, the next thing that I would do would be to just pick a new layer and start playing. Really all you're doing is you're playing with paint, but in digital form. So sky is blue. And I'm always working, when I'm doing any kind of coloring work, I'm always working at a 0 hardness so that you're not getting hard lines. So it depends on what I'm working on, but I don't want that. I want this. And the difference between your opacity and your flow is that if I take the opacity to 50 or 60% and I'm doing a lighter color, I can go back over what I'm doing and I don't get any overlay until the next time I bring my brush down. So every time I lift my pen from the tablet, then it creates another layer of 60% opacity. But as long as I don't lift my pen, I can color the whole thing, go over areas as much as I want and not do that. If I put my opacity at 100, but I take my flow down to say 20, then it actually starts, well, let's take it down a little lower so you can see. So see how the flow, you can still see without me picking up, it darkens. So I don't have to wait to pick my hand up to be able to see that. So that's the difference between flow and opacity. I think that's about all that I got right now for everything. I had a couple of people that did send me other pieces, so let's stop screen sharing. And you can definitely ask me any questions that you have. Otherwise, I think we'll probably draw it to a close. Let's see what we got. Here's the original and the worked on photo. Is it that if you took the picture too dark in the first place, it can't really be fixed? Even lightened, it looks too dark. Okay, let's see if we can pull these up. There's a lot that you can do with exposure. So let's take a look. Okay. We'll sit these side by side. These actually, they look the same to me. Maybe it's just mine. This is a really cute shot, by the way. No, there's definitely a lot you can do. Let's see if we can do this one up. What's the name of it? Okay, so working with images that are underexposed. The first thing that you lose with people portraits that are underexposed is the eyes. So for me, the irises, especially when they have little cherub faces like that, I want to be able to see it. So let's go in and make a new layer, and let's just see. And it's good to see what Photoshop says. So this is the best that Photoshop says it can do with it on auto. Okay. I think we can do better. So the problem is that if we go in and we just pull up the exposure, he's underexposed. The photo is not necessarily, because if we were looking at, say, the window, we'd say that the window is actually a little overexposed. And if we were looking at the coats behind him or the wall, then they might be just a little bit under, but it's not too bad. But what we really want to see is the face. So the first thing you have to pay attention to is what is it that we're trying to expose. So we're losing a lot of information. Like, it wasn't until I zoomed in that I appreciated the fact that he's taking this entire computer apart very meticulously. So we would probably want to add in a lot of the exposure here and make that the priority. But if we go in and we play with the exposure overall and just adjust the sliders, by the time we get to the point that he's looking okay, the windows are really blown out behind. So there's a couple of different ways that you can play with light when you're trying to adjust things. One is the exposure, obviously. The other ones are your levels and your curves. So, for example, taking the true black away is lightening looker right around his shoes, but it's also matting the image. We can go in and pull down from the midtones. Okay, so that's one way. And by pulling just the shadows up, which is essentially, you can do that too. There is the shadows and highlights, which is doing something similar. It's telling the program to do something similar, but I like having control over the shadows, the highlights, and the midtones, as opposed to just having an adjuster. So this is doing the same thing. You can pull and decide with the shadows. It's nice because you can pull the shadows up, and then you can also pull some of the highlights down to even out. And then when you want to, you can come here and you can play with these. So this is your mid-tone point. So the further up it goes, the darker the mid-tone point is going to be, and the further back. So a lot of Photoshop and efficiency is really just play. So here we go. Okay. You have your brightness and your contrast, which you can also use to just punch it up a little bit. And then you also have your curves. Now I shoot, and a lot of my work has a matted kind of feel to it, but basically what you're doing here is you're changing the overall light. So this is going to take away your light or add it in. So now we're totally exposed, but we're getting a little bit of noise. So let's come back just a little. And then depending on this point, if you're bringing it down here and pulling over, as opposed to if you're up here, you can start to see how the quality of light shifts and what's actually highlighting and not lighting. So, and then if we wanted to pull some of those shadows back, we could shift it just a little bit on the curve. So that's not too bad. Okay, so now we have tons of light. I'm not sure that I want that much light from the windows and on the keyboard because I like this. So we might go in and just take some of that back out. And again, you could do this with masking too, but I don't mind the shadows on here because it actually pulls out the texture. And really what I would want to keep the focus on is him. So again, if we took some of the shadows out from around him, and we'll do it just loosely, it's okay that we lose a little bit of the detail and the shadows and what's going on, because nobody cares about the coats on the background or the walls, and you would want to take your time and do this. You could also cut him out and do it and just edit him, but the point is that we're leaving him in light and as the focus and taking out what's left. Okay. Now, for me, the table is catching a lot of the highlight from the door, and I would actually want to go in and take that down. By clicking on the right layer. So that that's not distracting. Now, you'd want to do that as a separate layer, because when we get in close, you can see the line from where we did it, and you could just go in and erase that out if it was on a separate layer. But then once you have them selected and we're pretty happy with the light, then the next thing you want to do to pull it back together is just play with the color toning. So for me, let's go play with black and white a little bit. And tune it. We want to draw light from his face, so I'm going to pull up on the reds just so that his face pops, because there's reds and yellows in his face. and I'll leave it everywhere else. And then we can go to the color balance. We'll pull in some yellows on the highlights, give them a little rosy disposition. And then in the shadows, maybe pull some more blues in just to separate them just a bit. Okay. And so that's what we have. And that's what we started with. And I think it works. So yeah, so you can pull it out, and I don't think it necessarily. I mean, the problem is that when you don't get it right in camera, then you're fighting against what's already there. So if I'm painting, I'm starting with a blank canvas, and I'm just adding my own touches to it. If we're starting with a photograph and you're layering on top, you're still layering on top of what was there initially. So it's hard to pull it back that far when what's underneath is dark and gray, to add rosy little cheeks and yellow, sunny kind of skin. So, you know, the idea is to get it right in camera, but if you don't, there is a lot that you can do in Photoshop. And really the bottom line is that I don't care. I don't care if you get it right in camera. I don't care if you fix it in Photoshop. I don't care, as long as once you post that image and share it with the world, or you put it in a gallery, or you get it printed, it moves me. If it has some effect on me, if it makes me laugh, or it makes me cry, or it makes me, oh, like whatever it is, as long as it moves me and has an impact, then it's a good image, and how you got there is irrelevant to me. However, the more skills that you have in photography to get it right in camera, the less fixing work you have to do and the less time you have to spend, and the more ability you have to change the image and go from repairing and fixing your images to working on your individual style as an artist, which is what you should be spending your time in Photoshop doing. It's a tool for accentuation, you know, and having the skills in retouching as well enables you to save a lot of images like this one that are super adorable or really beautiful, or were the killer shot that the strobe didn't fire, you know, or something happened that threw off the shot, and you still want to be able to keep it. So I've saved quite a few images that way that would have been throwaways if I didn't have the Photoshop knowledge. And I've made some images that were good images exceptional because the content that I needed was there in camera when I downloaded it, and then all I had to do was tweak it. So, okay, I think that's it. We're well over our hour. We're almost into 2, which is actually short for me. So I will be back probably after WPPI, and we can pick a new topic. I hope it was helpful. Bye.